Okay, sorry about that. I am back now. Seems we've had some inclement weather in the area, so hopefully we'll stay connected at this point. So the last thing we were doing was looking at the the John and Jane Doe household. And so in here we just added John Doe as a household member. The second thing that we need to do is add Jane. We're going to add Jane Doe. The role she plays in the household is the spouse, and we can add her personal information in here at a later time. We can also add her status. She's going to be a member of this church. We can add a birthday, January 1st, and then you can decide whether or not you want to put a year in there. You can put 1980. Well, actually, that would be a bit surprising since they were married in 1960, but we can put 1940 as the year that she was born. But again, you can leave years out if your members are more comfortable having a birthday list that just has month and day. So now that we've got a couple members in, we can go in and start adding contributions. So click Done and back, and then go back to the dashboard. And as you can see, this you're in trial mode is still available, but the button that prompts you to create your first household is now gone. We can see that we've got 2 members added now, and we've got 1 household. So to add our first contribution, we can go Contributions and then Create. When you're creating a contribution, the first thing to do is put in the date. The date, like most things in FlockBase that exists by default, is going to be the current date. After you've selected that, you can go ahead and select a member. The reason that it is by member and not household is just because the IRS has said that individuals contribute, not couples and not families. When you create contribution letters, you can have the option to combine two individuals in the same household for that letter if you know that that couple is going to be filing jointly. If you do not know whether a couple is or is not going to be filing jointly, then it's probably better to send a separate letter if they contribute under separate names. So we're going to say that John has given us a check number 1234, and he's given $100 to our missions fund. Oh, excuse me. And on the memo of the check, he's written Missions in East Asia. So he's given this check. We've got the date, the member who gave it, his envelope number, if your church uses those, his payment type, the check number, and what he's giving towards, and then how much. When you add a memo, you can use that as just something for internal use to go and back and refer to later, or when you print out letters, you can choose to show what people gave to in their memo field. So when we give someone a letter, we can choose whether or not it has the memo on it. For example, if you want people to be able to differentiate between which mission they're giving to, but you don't want 20 missions purposes, you can just add the memo to their letter. Once we're done, we can just click the green Next button. That'll take us to a new blank screen where we can add a new contribution. Here we're going to see Jane Doe can give. And when we start typing a member's name, their full name will appear, whether or not we start with their first name or with their last name. Either one is fine. It just starts sorting by whatever you start typing, first or last name. For this one, we're going to say she actually gave it about a week ago. She gave on the 15th. And we just type that there. So now it's January 15th, 2021. Her payment was actually just cash, and she gave $10 to the general fund. She gave a $50 bill for the general fund. As soon as we selected the payment type of cash, you can note that the check number field is gone because that doesn't apply to cash. If you also switch it to credit card or direct deposit, that field changes to transaction number. But we're just going to say she gave $50 cash, and we're going to click Next. So now we can see when we go to Contributions and then Search that we've got 2 contributions in here. We've got Jane gave $50 to general fund, and John gave $100. Doesn't tell us the purpose on this screen, but it tells us the date that it was given, the type, and the amount, and the check number if applicable. Now that we've got a couple contributions in, we can add those to a deposit so that they start affecting our bank account balance. So when we took those to the bank, let's just make it easy and say we took them to the bank today. So the date, 1/23/2020, or 2021, excuse me. Whoa. Depending on your browser, you might also, when you click into this field, see a window like this where you can physically choose the date and do that. Once we've got the deposit created, we can click this purple button to select which contributions were taken to the bank at the same time. We can click these individually, or at the top, we can just select all. Once we've got them selected, just click Add in the top, and we'll say we took $150 to the bank. Now let's also say that there was $20 left in the plate with no name. So we just have anonymous cash giving, and the total of what went to the bank was $170. There are two ways we can handle that. The first of those is just go down to non-contribution items, pick an income account, so tithes and offerings to make sure it goes to the general fund, and say that $20 came in and it needs to go into the tithes and offerings income account. But it was not a contribution because no one's going to claim it on their taxes. It was just anonymous. That's one way that we can do that. There's actually another way to do that as well, which is probably more common. What we can do is go to membership and then households. For this, we can click the purple button to just quick add. And we're going to add anonymous giver. Once we type a first and a last name, if we do not select a household and just click submit, it's going to add a new household and add the anonymous giving member to that household. So as you can see, we're under membership and then households. We can see that we're in a list of our households, and there's a new household named giver, anonymous. The household name is anonymous giver. If we open that, there's not much information there. We can just see that there's one member named anonymous giver. So we'll go back, contributions create, and we'll say that anonymous giver on the 15th made a cash contribution for $20. And the reason that we do this as anonymous giver is so that we still have this sorted with contributions, even though it's not attached to a particular individual's name. So again, just click next, and then we're done on this blank screen, so we can just go back to that deposit under contributions deposit. So right now, this one, it doesn't have the right total, so we can click into view in the actions column to open it back up, click the purple select contributions button, and then add that back. So now we've got a $170 deposit, which is what actually went to the bank. And when we click back, this is our deposit list showing that on January 23rd of this year, we had a $170 deposit. That will also appear in our register. If we go to accounting and then register, we'll see two things for our checking account. We've got our deposit of $170, and we've also got our journal entry to establish balances of $100,000. So the most recent transactions are always sorted at the top for convenience to see what you've done most recently. And then in the far right column, immediately to the left of the actions, you'll see the running balance as of today's date. So right now we've got $100,000 and $170. So we've got a couple contributions in there. Now let's go ahead and look at, just briefly, how we can look at a contribution letter. To do that, we can just go membership and then members. And if we want to look for everyone's contribution letter at once, we can click this button right here, the gray button, to generate the contribution letter. Date range, let's go ahead and make it this year because the contributions we just entered are for this year. Non-deductible, if you have non-deductible purposes and you want to show those on letters with an acknowledgement that they cannot claim those on their taxes, you can check that box. If you don't even want to have non-deductible contributions on there to keep it a little bit cleaner, you can just deselect that. It doesn't matter. You don't have to provide evidence that someone gave a contribution that's not deductible because they won't be claiming it anyway. You can make it compact just to thin down the lines a little bit if you have people making a lot of contributions and you want to save paper. Detailed adds a little bit more detail. If you don't select this, what you provide will still have the date and amount of the contribution and that it is tax deductible. So you're handing them a valid letter whether or not you have this checked. Show memos, discussed a little bit earlier, but that's just if you want to provide a little bit of extra information. Again, that's not mandatory either. Additional page break. This is not going to matter if you're just printing on the front side. If you are choosing to print front and back, you will need to select this additional page break just so that you won't have one person's letter on the front of a page and another person's letter on the back of that same page. The additional page break prevents that from happening. Once we've got these selected, just click OK. And this is going to be our letter. Right now, it's pretty basic because we've got just our church's name, demonstration organization, doesn't have an address. We've got the name Jane Doe, who also doesn't have an address. And we haven't added any header or footer text to our letter. It just shows our name, the contributor's name, it says contribution report, and it says their total tax-deductible contributions in addition to an itemized list. To change that, we're going to go up here and close this window, and we can change that under Settings and then Organization. For our address, we can put 1234 Straight Street. Excuse me. Our city, we're in Weatherford, Texas, 76087. Your EIN will not be appearing on these letters. That's not mandatory in the US. Your EIN is going to appear on things like a W-2 and a 1099. Contribution header is what appears at the top of the contribution letter above the itemized list. Contribution footer appears at the bottom. Now the IRS does say that you need to have some sort of acknowledgement that givers did not receive anything in exchange for their contributions. That text doesn't have to be verbatim, just something to this effect. Just no goods or services were received in exchange for listed contributions other than intangible religious benefits. Down towards the bottom, a few lines later, you probably want to add a few lines that's just underscores and say signature of church secretary or chief treasurer or head trustee, whoever you have who's going to be signing these letters. The header, just something simple. Thank you for giving in the year 20XX. So either it's 2020 or 2021. Without your faithful giving, we would not be able to do all the work which God is calling us toward. So just something to thank people for their participation in giving. Put that at the top, and then down at the bottom, this text that has to be in there, no goods or services received in exchange for that. So we can now go back to membership and then members, and let's print that letter again. As you can see here, the address that we put in the top, or that we put in under Settings Organization, now appears at the top. And on the contribution report, we've got this text at the top, and we've got this text at the bottom, and then a line for the secretary's signature. So just pretties it up a little bit, and you can add as many lines of text as you want. And the reason that this is at the top in this position, and the reason that the contributor's name is here, if you have the contributor's address and the church's address in here, these letters, when you fold them 3 ways, will fit in a number 10 double window pane envelope, so you won't need to purchase and print out labels anymore. These will just fit in a number 10 double window pane envelope. Fits perfectly if you fold it 3 ways. So that's how to print those letters. And now let's go back. We were just on that settings organization page, and you probably noticed that down towards the bottom, we've got a header for data backup. This is where you're going to be doing backups. If you're online, there's no real reason that you have to do backups regularly. You can do them. For example, if you're about to make significant changes to your database, whether you're about to merge a lot of names together or something of that nature, you can download a copy of your database in its exact file format. It's a SQLite format. That's what the database runs while it's live, and that's what you can save a copy of at any time. Your computer will likely not have anything to open this file, but if at a later point you want to restore, you can just send us a copy. Also, we have alternative formats if you want to do backup. So a CSV file takes all of your data and puts it in a series of spreadsheets that you can open in Excel. CSV is just a plain text form of Excel files. And then JSON is designed as a human-readable format. Your computer is probably not going to have a way to interpret this, but if you want to have a copy of all your data in JSON format instead of SQLite or CSV, you're available to do that as well. At FlockBase, we believe that you own your data completely. You can download a full copy of it at any time. So you can do that at any point, and we can restore that only if you have a SQLite backup. Obviously, if you're on desktop, you should be making regular backups, and here is where you can do that. If you're on desktop, let me just make a short note. I'm not going to show it here, but if you open it and go to the login page, you have an option that cloud users did not have. It's called Set File Location. That is not going to change, or that's not going to make a backup. All that does is change where you're opening FlockBase from. So if you move or rename the database, you can set the file location to be the file of that other name or in that other location. That's not going to make a backup, so if you click that intending to make a backup, all you're doing is moving where you're saving FlockBase. It doesn't actually make an additional copy of the database in a different location. Where you have to back up is under Settings and then Organization, scroll down, and then under the Data Backup header, click Download. Okay, and so now let's go back to the dashboard. And we've got a little bit of information here. We've got 3 members, 2 households. We've got our bank account cash position right now, and our contributions overview for the last week or so. Down in the bottom right, we've got our fund balances. So these black numbers in the middle are exactly what we have as of today in each of our funds. On the right, we've got either green, or if it's negative, it'll be red. That just shows whether or not a fund has increased during this calendar year. So the dashboard is always going to be by calendar year rather than fiscal year because it shows information that's pertinent to contributions. Contributions are reported on a calendar year basis because they go with tax filing, so they operate independently of your church's fiscal year. So even these fund balances, everything on here goes by fiscal year. Excuse me. So in the general fund, we had those 2 contributions totaling $70. So for this year, we're in the green. We're up $70. So our total in the general fund is $25,070. Similarly, for missions, we've got $30,100 because of that $100 contribution we made from John Doe. Also, we've got giving by purpose for the year. That just shows that we've had $70 in general fund and $100 in missions as of this calendar year. So now let's go back to the accounting portion of the program. As we saw a little bit earlier, our register shows kind of a running total, a running ledger of what we're doing with our bank account. You'll have a register for a variety of accounts: checking, savings, brokerage account. Those all have payment, deposit, and journal entry in the top right. Because they're bank accounts, you can make payments using them to print a check, or you can make a deposit into them like you physically do at a bank. You'll also have some separate accounts. So one of note is going to be an account named Funds Awaiting Deposit. Get a lot of questions about this one. All that this one means is that it's a step in the integration between contributions and the accounting portion of the program. When someone hands you a check, you technically gain an asset at that point in time. So if I give you a check, or if I give the church a check for $100 to the general fund balance goes up at the moment the check is received, even though it hasn't been deposited in the bank yet. So to reflect that, we've got this funds awaiting deposit account. So if I give a check on, let's say, the 20th of January, and it's not to the bank until the 23rd of January, in those 3 days, in the meantime, that check is in the general fund. So it's the general fund has been raised by $100, but also it's waiting in this funds awaiting deposit account. And then, so you can see right here, we had anonymous giver and Jane Doe gave $70 between the pair on the 15th, and then it was given back, or given over to the bank account. It was moved to the bank account on the 23rd. So in the meantime, in those 8 days, it just sat in the funds awaiting deposit account. If you have any questions about why that exists, or separate from this, if you'd like us to elaborate, just feel free to drop a comment on that, and we might go back to that later. And then also, you're going to have, for the tithes and offerings, you have income accounts, things like that. All of these will have a ledger, or all of these will have a register, but all that's doing is showing you kind of the history of that account. You don't have the option to make a payment, and you don't have the option to make a deposit into accounts other than bank accounts. So let's go ahead and do that right now. In the checking account, let's make a payment. Right now, we don't have any payees, but we can add them on the fly. So if I start typing hardware store, it's going to give me a prompt to add hardware store. If I had ever made a payment to this payee, I could click this purple recall button, and it would tell me, okay, you paid this amount out of this account to this payee the last time you called up this payee. Would you like to do that again? And I could just click yes. This is for the first time, so I'm going to buy supplies to repair exterior door. And I'm actually going to write a check for this. It's going to be check 1235, and the amount is going to be $200. Up here, we've already selected which bank account that money is actually coming out of, and here is where we select the expense account that we're listing this for. So we're going to give this to the repairs and maintenance expense account. So when we make payments, what this is going to do is going to lower the checking account up here, and then down here, it'll lower the fund balance of the fund to which the repairs and maintenance account is connected, which is the general fund. The memo, if I click in this field, by default, it's going to just add in the description that we created. You can remove that or change that as necessary. For now, we're going to leave it. The amount, $200, and then we can click Save. If you have checks, an electronic check stock that you want to print onto, down at the bottom, you can print that right here. So there's a little circle button that has a printer on it. And this will generate a PDF, and you can print that PDF. If you don't have check stock but you would like to order some, what you will need is a laser top check. Well, if you have a laser printer, you'll need a laser, but you need to have QuickBooks compatible checks, and the check goes on top and then 2 stubs below, as you can see here. So this is the stub that you give to your payee. Generally, you would do that for payroll, and this is the stub that you retain for your own records down at the bottom. So again, you can find those at a variety of online retailers. We don't really have a preferred retailer to refer you to, but you just need QuickBooks compatible top checks with a check on top, 2 stubs below. It'll look just like it should print onto that from this screen right here. And once we've got that done, just close that. If we want to make a new payment down here, to the right of the Save button, we can do Save and New, and we can create a new check from right here. Don't need to do that, so right now we're just going to delete that new payment. And in the register, when we click back, you'll now see that we have 3 items. So we had an increase of $100,000 from the beginning balance, an increase of $170 from that deposit of contributions, and now a decrease of $200. So our running total is $99,970. So right now, we're going to do just a very basic reconciliation. So under accounting, and then reconciliations. This is where you're going to take your bank statement. So you have a printed copy or a PDF copy from your bank, and you're going to verify what you've been putting in your books to what the bank says has been going into and out of your checking account. On here, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a reconciliation as of 12/31/2020. And we're going to add just a single item to it. It's going to be that journal entry that says $100,000 in checking. Also of note, when you do a reconciliation, it's just going to be for one bank account at a time. So you can add in part of this journal entry. We would still have to reconcile another part of that journal entry when reconciling the savings account. So right here, we've got that one item for $100,000. We're going to say that our statement balance as of that same date was also $100,000. Once the total items match up to the total of the statement balance, this button is going to highlight to reconcile. So we can click that, and now that item is locked from editing. So if we can open this item up, so just actions column and then view, you can now see that this checking account is grayed out. We can no longer affect which account this was or what the debited total was. So when you want to keep a transaction from being edited, it needs to be added to a reconciliation, because once something is reconciled, it can no longer be changed unless it's removed from that reconciliation. So that's our starting. So we've got that reconciled now. So as of our very beginning balances, we're reconciled. Now we're just going to add two items to a subsequent reconciliation. We're going to say we're reconciling as of January 31st of this year. And we're going to say that our statement balance, well, it's probably easier to find these two items both reconcile. So we've got that check on our bank statement, 1235 for $200. We check that. Got a deposit of $170. Check that. Probably should note as well, on here you're going to see debit and credit. What you see on your bank statement might not match this exactly. This, from a bookkeeping or accounting perspective, treats your bank account as an asset. So debits make it go up and credits make it go down. You might see that your bank account is credited for $100, which means that your bank account went up by $100. That's going to be opposite in here. All you need to remember, credits make it go down, debits make it go up, and should be good to go there. Got those items added, and we're going to say the computed total was $99,970. We're going to put that total up here. You may be tempted at a certain point to put in a comma up here. What happens when you put in any item other than a number in that field is it's going to treat it as two separate numbers. So it separates the 99 from the 970. So just put in pure numbers and you'll see that you can reconcile right here. And so now when we go back to accounting and then register, we'll see next to all those items in this column, the cleared column, they're all C for cleared. And what that means is when we open them, so this payment 1235, it's blacked out. We can change the expense account that was used, but the checking account was definitely used, and this amount was credited against the checking account. And so now we've got that in, we're going to look at just a couple more accounting things. First of those is we're going to set up just a small budget under settings, financial, and then budgets. I'm going to click new, and we're just going to name this the 2021 budget. Again, this is just a very small budget, just a proof of concept right here. And we're going to select that we're expecting in our tithes and offerings, we're going to receive $100,000 in tithes and offerings during the course of this year. What you want to budget for is mostly just going to be your general fund. It's a little bit tricky to budget for people giving designated items. So, for example, you know that when somebody gives $100 that has to be spent on missions, you don't have the option. You can't vote on whether or not that money is going to be spent on missions when somebody gives you restricted money, unless you have something to that effect in your constitution and bylaws. But in general, when somebody gives restricted donations, it has to go to that purpose. So there's not much point in budgeting that. Typically, you just want to budget for your general fund. And you select an income or expense account in this field on the left. For example, we have this income account, and the amount you either expect to take in from that account if it's income, or to spend out of that account if it's an expense. Don't worry about budgeting your checking or savings account, because those don't really matter here. You just want to pick which expense accounts you're going to use and which income accounts you're going to receive that money into. So let's go ahead and say that we've got the expense account we used earlier, repairs and maintenance. We expect to spend $12,000 over the course of this year on just upkeep of the building. On our support staff salaries, we're going to spend $35,000. Curriculum, we're going to spend $4,500. And let's just add one more here. Our office supplies, we're going to spend $900. So we've got a very basic budget in here. Again, your budget is going to look a lot more robust than this, but you just pick income and expense accounts and how much you either expect to take in or spend out of those accounts during the course of a calendar year. You also can do a budget that's monthly. The reason that you typically don't want to do that is because a budget over a course of a year makes a little bit more sense because you have higher and lower spending areas over separate months. So your children's programs or your youth programs are probably going to spend a little bit more money in the summer, and then church at large programs might spend a little bit more money for outreach when the holiday season rolls around and you're expecting a lot of visitors. And also April is going to have Easter expenses, things like that. So what you're spending out of every expense account is not even month to month. So it's a little bit simpler to budget over the course of an entire year because you have all those seasons where spending might go up and down. So now that we've got that budget in and we've got a couple payments already in there, I'm going to show you a report that's probably going to be very important. It's under accounting and then reports. And then the type header that we're going to select is going to be budget. On here, we're going to select that 2020 budget or the 2021 budget. The fund is just going to be the general fund. Don't worry about departments for right now. You can select that if you want a very specific report, but most of the time that's going to be a little bit more than is necessary. We're also going to show percentage when we print our budget versus actual. So we're going to show what percentage of our budget we've spent so far. So when we print this, right now, this is for last year, excuse me. For this year, we've brought in 70,000 of the 100,000 we expect. So right now, we still have to bring in 99,930 to meet our budget. So we're at 0.07%. For our expenses, we've spent none in some of these, but we've got the $200 here that we've spent out of repairs and maintenance out of our budgeted 12,000. So we've still got 11,800. And that's probably high for our repairs and maintenance on a $100,000 budget anyway. But we've spent 1.66% of what we've expected as of this time of the year. So this is just doing that on a yearly basis. You can also do 2 dates. If we want to look at this month for our first column and then the full year for the second column, we can do a 2-column report that shows our actual for this month and then our actual for the full year and then our full year budget and our current difference between those two. So that's one of the reports that's probably going to be the most helpful if you've set up a budget, which we strongly encourage you to do just because it gives you a much better sense of where you're at compared to just a normal profit and loss. Because right here it shows you, yes, we've spent this amount or we've brought in this amount, but we don't have that reference of what we expected that we get from the budget report. So that's a couple of those. And now let's go ahead and look at some of the membership stuff. we're going to go ahead and create a group. So household groups, let's say we've got Sunday school 40 plus. And we're going to go ahead and add our John and Jane Doe household. So the way that I did that was just next to this group, I clicked the view button. And then on here, you can print some reports for this group, but there's no one here yet. And we're going to go ahead and add John and Jane Doe. So just click this add button. And so now when we exit, we've got our Sunday School 40 plus. We can print an Excel sheet that's got their household data. We can print a CSV. Those are going to be pretty much the same. CSV is just plain text if you want to open it in something other than Excel. And then we can also print labels or a list. So we've got this list. We've got John and Jane Doe. Right now our list is pretty scarce because we've only got one household in it. But that's kind of what you can do with a household group. We can also go in and create people groups. So we can do missions committee, and we can go ahead and add in just the same way John or Jane Doe. Now what you can also do with a people group is you can add advanced. So we're looking at our missions committee group, and again the way I got here is just people groups and then click to view. Up in the top right next to add, we've got this down arrow, and we can select add advanced. And what I can do is I can click on these gray bars to open up some filters. So I can look through who has the status of member, or who has an active household, or even who has given greater than or equal to a certain amount during a time frame. So let's just see who's given during the course of, let's say ever, to the missions fund, or missions fund and general fund, or general fund. Actually, let's just keep this the missions fund. So we're going to look at a member who is an active member, has an active household, and has given at least $1 ever to the missions purpose. And then we click blue search. Right now, the only person who meets those qualifications is John Doe. Once we've searched and found that selected list, we can just click add. And so right now we have those same options. We can print an Excel spreadsheet, a CSV file, labels, or a list of who's in this group based on those qualifications. If you have a home number or a mobile number or an email in for them, that'll be an information on this group as well. One of the other things that you can do with a group once they exist is emailing. So that's under membership and then email. When you send an email, you can send it just to a select group, a people group. When you select your email address, you can put in your personal email address, and that's where replies will go. Once you put in your email address, you're going to need to go ahead and click verify, just to verify that you have control of that account before you send anything from that account. So don't want to be involved in any spam here. Also, you cannot use a flockbase.com domain when you're sending that. It won't send out. You need to use your personal email address that's been verified through the system before you can start sending. You can then select your name. So when people see this email, they'll see it's from Demonstration Church for sample email. We use a B email editor. It's just BEE. I think you can look it up as BEE free, just online if you want to see a little bit of demonstration of that. On here, you can just start dragging in content. You can start typing there, and you can add in new content as well. So just drag in an image, and it puts it there. Drag in a divider between those two items. You can add videos, HTML code, and social media links as well. Once you start dragging, you can't just drop it wherever. You have to drag it until it gives you this little blue prompt that says drag it here. Once you select that you're going to add an image or a video, You can add a video URL if you want to add a YouTube link or something like that, or a video that's hosted on your site. If it's an image, you can add up here. You can search free photos, or you can upload your own image files. So free photos, let's just search for a church. We can import that, and then we've got this church right here. We can either preview it to see that file, or we can delete this from our folder, or we can insert it here to our email. So just a couple basic things. This is not an email that I would send as is, but just showing that you have some of those content options on here. If you want to change the width of that, you can do that here. Just set it to custom. And then if you've got dynamic images or anything like that that you've uploaded, you can select that here as well. And so you can pick a URL for that or HTML code. You can change image right here, apply effects, etc. Once you're done, you can just go ahead and click save to save that template. And then at a later time, you can reset. So just a blank email and then just load template, and you've got this sample template that you can bring right back up. Once you're done, just click down at the bottom, this purple send. So now let's just look at a couple membership reports. And for these, you can add in those same filters. So we can do just our active members for right now. I'm not going to worry about what people's households are or any contributions that they've made. I can print a list, mailing labels, or a data sheet. A data sheet is going to be a CSV file. I can also do a directory right here. I can pick how many columns are in that directory, and I can choose whether or not I want photos to be in that directory. Haven't uploaded any photos, so right now it's just John and Jane Doe. So to add some more information, we can go back and add in their address. And just put a couple things in these fields. So now that they've got an address, we're going to give them a phone number. And then we're also going to go in. Well, actually, that should probably do it. So we can go to membership and then reports, and we print member filters, member status, and we want to select members when we do a directory. Probably don't want to print out a list of all your non-members or that anonymous giving member. So I do that directory. We've got John and Jane Doe live at 1234 Street in Weatherford, Texas, and also their phone number will appear on this as well, unless you've selected them as not having their phone number appear. All right, looks like everything has been answered in the chat. If you have any questions, or if you're watching this at a later time, feel free to send us an email. You can email me at ryan@flockbase.com, RYAN at flockbase.com if you have any questions from this. Or you can send a general support email to support@flockbase.com. That's SUPPORT@flockbase.com. And as always, you're free to call us at 877-883-5625.